Hello, good evening to everyone who's watching, and welcome to Turtle News, the only news you need to keep up to date with the issues that really matter. I am John Matthew Talamayan, here reporting live at the studio, and today we're going to discuss about the Philippines' history on labor export and its effects on society. The topics that we're going to explore today and discuss are number 1, the reasons for different waves of labor exports from the Philippines, how these exports led to the coining of the term Bagong Bayani, the role that Corazon Aquino played in legitimizing the global recognition of Filipinos, and lastly, the answer to the question, are we really looking at heroes, or are we just calling our OFWs heroes to withdraw from the fact that our citizens are leaving the country for better opportunities? Here we have our first reporter for tonight, Miss Nadine Tuazon.
Thank you, JM. Good evening, everyone. This is Nadine Tuazon from Turtles News, reporting about the different waves of labor exports in our country. In the year 1988, Corazon Aquino gave a speech in Hong Kong where she uttered the words, "Kayo ang mga bagong bayani for the country's OFWs." By that year, approximately 500,000 people had been deployed, bringing in roughly $1 billion in remittances. Enormous foreign debt and balance of the payment crisis resulted in a dismal economy. Filipinos disliked the Marcos government because of human rights violations and widespread corruption. However, the Cory magic was muted by the economic reality. In 1984 and 1985, the Philippines economy was in shambles, with the GDP growing at a negative rate. To offer the country a strong credit rating among foreign investors, debt service became the rule of thumb in budgetary management. By 1988, debt service accounted for more than a third of the national budget. On the labor front, the Aquino administration was also confronted with a difficult situation. Poverty was aggravated by unemployment. Due to these limits, Aquino was unable to implement a major economic reform and had no choice but to rely on overseas employment to manage the country's economic issues. Moreover, 600,000 Filipinos were working abroad towards the end of 1991, months before Aquino left power, nearly double the amount when Aquino took over from Marcos in 1986, and though deployment fell in 1989 and 1990, it increased by nearly 30% in 1991. Aquino's overseas employment policy reflected the themes of continuity and change, in that it continued to view migration as a resource, 64 overseas Filipino workers as heroes generating endeavor, worthy of national government attention, regulation, and control, while also shifting to policies geared toward worker employment and welfare. According to Rodriguez, Aquino depicted international migration as a free act of self-sacrificing individuals living in a democratic society rather than a sort of forced conscription under a totalitarian state by defining out migration as heroic. Back to you, JM.
Thank you, Nadine. Now, here we have Dana Therese Tan to report the term Bagong Bayani and how this word was coined.
Thank you, JM, and good evening, everyone. Now, when you hear the term Bagong Bayani, everyone would think that it's the overseas Filipino workers or the OFW. Now, upon examining this term, let us all go back to where it all began. The park was named after the country's national hero whose sacrifices under the Spanish regime is said to have influenced the term Bagong Bayani. The Spanish colonization's connection to the current labor out-migration is also profoundly cultural and one which greatly formed the construction of migrant workers as self-sacrificing Bagong Bayani or modern-day heroes. When late President Corazon Aquino uttered the word, "Kayo ang Bagong Bayani" in a speech in Hong Kong, the state's active role in the labor exports has by then invoked to refer to OFWs or migrant workers as Bagong Bayani. According to Jaime Veneracion, during the pre-colonial period in the Philippines, bayani or heroes are perceived as people who are willing to defend their country with a strong sense of leadership without the promise of reward. This also leads to a conclusion where heroism is a form of sacrificing and suffering for the love of the country. With that being said, according to Guevara, this term is especially significant now that currently people are framing OFW exodus as sacrifices or acts that serve the interests of both families and the country. Indeed, OFWs has played a major role with regards to the local and global economy. Thus, with this representation of Bagong Bayani, as we have discussed earlier, this was then used up until now. JM?
Thank you, Dana. Now, to dissect the role that the former President Corazon Aquino played, here we have Semilla and Miguel.
Thank you, JM. Kayo ang bagong bayani, a phrase the former President Corazon Aquino said to the public to appreciate and determine the overseas Filipino workers.
Or in short, OFW as the new heroes. This was the first time the word Bagong Bayani was said and became a new meaning to the role of the OFW in the Philippines that contributed a major role to her candidacy to take down the Marcos, and also a controversial meaning if it was right to call these people heroes.
During the regime of the Marcoses, the Philippines have gained a lot of debt amounting to $27.5 billion, leading to a gross domestic product negative growth from 1984 to 1985.
Because of the large debt that the Marcoses left, poverty rates rose and unemployment worsened poverty. Because the debt was so high, President Cory Aquino relied on the overseas Filipino workers to address the economic problems, which was a good advantage to gain more support and to give the country good credit ratings to foreign investors. This situation led to more support for the former president to bring back democracy to the country and created a society against the Marcos regime.
Now, here we have Santillan here to criticize the term Bagong Bayani and to answer the question that are we really looking at heroes, or are we just calling our OFW heroes, to withdraw our attention from the fact that our citizens are leaving the country for better opportunities.
Thank you, JM. The Philippines, as we all know, is labeled as a third world country. And as Catriona said,
and the life there is it's poor and it's very sad, and
the citizens aim for a higher pay because compared to other countries, the salaries in the Philippines is low and does not justify the hard work of our workers, making some people leave their homes, sacrificing the warmth of their families and the familiarity of their surroundings. However, this does not justify them to be called the Bagong Bayani. The renowned heroes of the Philippines have sacrificed their lives on the very lands of the country and have directly contributed to the development of the Philippines without moving out. In contrast with the OFWs, they chose to be off the country, to mainly help themselves, to have a higher pay, and to be able to provide for their families and for themselves. Realistically speaking, the first reason a person migrates is that they know there's more opportunities and higher pays outside the country, and it is also an opportunity to travel the world. As sad as this may sound, some OFWs aim to have a permanent citizenship on that migrated country and further the agenda by applying for a visa for their families to be able to move with them. Is that what you call a bayani? Someone who leaves their own homeland and gathers more people to join them with no thoughts of returning? Well, maybe they'll return, but for sure they won't permanently reside here, as they already found a new home outside the Philippines. Thank you. Back to Studio JM.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you to all of the reporters. I hope to all of our viewers, you guys enjoyed and at least learned something new. Please don't forget to follow me on Instagram, and if you like the video, press the thumbs up button and consider subscribing. Well, that's it. This is Turtle News, and we're out. Good night.